Shall we start? Why not? Yep. Yes. Okay. My name's Jane Parkin. I'm chairing the meeting today. I'm a member of the Pro Bono OR committee. And just in case you thought you got the wrong webinar or something, this one is Strategic Planning in Uncertain Times, How OR Can Help. Ruth, could we have the next slide, please? So what we'll do today, what we've done with all the others, we've got welcome and introduction, we've got the main talk, there's time for questions and answers, and lastly at 2 o'clock it's closed, but if anyone wants some informal discussions with any of the PBOR team, then they're very welcome. Next slide, please. So welcome everybody. This is the last of the current series of Pro Bono OR talks, probably the most useful one because it's all about strategy. We're thinking of putting on another series next year, but in the meantime, if you've missed any of our previous ones, you can find them on our website. Thanks. Next one, please. So, just in case you didn't know, OR is a scientific discipline. I was really excited when I first discovered OR and I thought, yes, that's what we need. It can make the world work better. And the advantage is it doesn't matter which part of your organization you want to look at, you can still use OR. So today we're talking more about strategy. But if you want to improve your systems or your processes or your operations, there's always something in OR that you can use. You can use data analysis, computer modeling, and manage to improve throughout. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Jane, did you want to do the quick poll or not?
No, probably not, but thanks anyhow, Louise. Yes. So, one real advantage of using OR in the third sector is that in the third sector, you have a lot of situations where they're complex, messy, multiple stakeholders, multiple objectives, uncertainty. Hello, Daniel, good to see you. And when I first started in OR, I worked in the private sector and I worked in logistics and supply chain management, and life was very simple in those days. All you had to do in logistics and supply chain management is get the right product to the right place at the right time at the cheapest cost. So simple, no interconnections, no complexities. There weren't different stakeholders with different agendas. There weren't multiple objectives. It was wonderful. But then I moved into government and suddenly it got a great deal more messy. And now I do a lot of work in the third sector and it certainly is complex. Next slide, please, Ruth. So as well as OR, there's a lot of general problem solving that we are pretty good at. We do statistical analysis, we're good on analytics, forecasting for the future, developing strategy, performance measures, you name it, anything to do with numbers, basically, we can do it. Next one, please. And so how OR works, we've basically got two stages. When you've got a new problem situation, we tend to start off with soft methods. We look at the people and the context, see what different points of view are, what different people have different ideas about what one's doing. And once we've done that and clarified the problem, we go through and we use our hard methods, which are tried and tested mathematical modeling methods. And we manage to improve outcomes through a whole load of ways of doing it. So we hopefully get clearer agreement about your strategy. We help with data. We help deeper insight. looking at options, predicting outcomes, estimating risks, and we're very good at what-if analysis, scenario planning. Next slide, please. So that's generally OR, and if you're interested, there's a lot more on the OR Society website. We'll give you the link at the end. Pro Bono OR, we set up about 10 years ago, and this is a service to third sector organisations, and we help them by using OR to improve their operations, efficiency and decision making. We've worked for a huge number of organisations, and you can see some of those linked below. Next slide, please. So we match experienced volunteers. We've got over 1,000 experienced volunteers. We match them with charities who've got challenges, problems, been running for 10 years, and we've got over 150 satisfied clients. Next slide, please. Just before I introduce our speaker, please, will you, if you've got any questions or any comments at any time, just stick them in the chat box and we'll come to them at the end. We do encourage communication both ways. This isn't just us talking at you. We want to hear your points of view, your thoughts as well. So please use the chat box. So I am very pleased to welcome our speaker, Ruth Kaufman. I could go on and tell you about Ruth for the whole of the rest of the seminar, but I shall get it as short as I can. She's worked in OR strategy and change management in the public sector for many years. She's a board member of a huge number of different charities, including the one that is most exciting, I think, which is to do with a charity that helps people report maritime accidents. So if you want to know about that particular charity, ask Ruth at the end. She's the chair of the Pro Bono OR committee. She's a past president of the Operational Research Society. And as far as I know, she is the only person who has got an OBE for services to operational research. So welcome, and over to Ruth, who will be talking about, next one, please. Talking about how you can improve things. Over to you, Ruth.
Thanks very much, Jane. And I am actually chair of CHIRP, and I've been chair also of, as Jane mentioned, the OR Society, and of a charity that provided counselling services to help women affected by domestic violence recover their lives. And those are generally small charities which are really vulnerable to uncertainty and change. And that's one of the things that's triggered me in wanting to give this talk today. So thank you all very much for coming and listening to me talking about one of my hobby horses. Jane said I'd be talking about strategic planning. I will be talking particularly about uncertainty and any sort of planning and target setting under uncertainty, but thinking more of how we deal with this question of what lies ahead, which road should we take when we can't see what on earth is going on, when as far as we know, if we make the wrong decision, we could be dashed against the rocks, and when everything involves people who can do all sorts of things which may surprise us, may support us, may surprise us adversely, but who also have their own agendas and are not just parts of the environment that we have to navigate. So against that background, you still have to make decisions. You can't stop and wait for the world to move on. And there's a whole load of different sorts of decisions you have to deal with. I'm going to mention 3 different types of uncertainty to start with. And when we talk about uncertainty, and the pictures that I just presented make you think about uncertainty in the world about us. But there are other sorts of uncertainty in the kind of complex, interconnected, stakeholder-driven, goal-driven world that charities operate in, which we sometimes overlook, but which can also be really a hindrance to clear understanding of what the right way ahead is. So I'm going to talk briefly about 3 different sorts of uncertainty. The one I've just been describing about the world and so on is uncertainty about the environment. But I'm also going to talk about uncertainty about values and related decisions. And when I say values, I mean weighing up what's most important. So it's not just looking at the values in the sense of many charities will have a list of their organizational values, responsive, caring, open, diverse, whatever. It's values in the sense of when you are deciding what to do next, what is most important? Is it more important to get the money in and compromise with whatever the grant maker is or contract provider is asking you to do? Is it better to focus on reaching more users with a lesser service, or fewer users with a greater service? Are you risk averse, or are you willing to take a risk? All of these things about how you feel, how your organization feels, how your different stakeholders feel about what you ought to do, what's more important, what's less important. Related decisions. And I really have seen this paralyze an organization. It would be something like, if you just to take an example, if you are in a charity that happens to own a building and you're responsible for building management, you have to decide whether to refurbish or sell. And whether you refurbish or sell may depend on what the services people are deciding to run in terms of different activities that require the centre. And without the information from those service people about exactly what their plans are, you feel you can't make the decision on whether to refurbish or sell. In your different team, maybe one floor down, you are deciding what services you ought to be running. Where will you run them? Well, it depends whether this building is still going to be available. So you won't make a decision about the whether or not to run until you've heard from the buildings people about whether they're going to refurbish or sell. So it's possible for decisions to get caught in that you go first situation. And then the one that I've been talking about, uncertainty about the world around us. What sort of world are we really in? What do you do about uncertainty about values? There are several things that I can suggest. I'm not going to spend too long talking about this here, but there's a whole area of operational research which looks at this. But the easiest thing to do is to ask people, you know, what's more important to them, and maybe ask the top people in the organization, or the board, what's most important to them. You get some answers and you can move on. You may need to do some workshopping with people, or to bring people into a room and structure the way you ask in order to to tunnel down and work out really what do they mean by things. Are they genuinely all on the same page, meaning the same thing? Are they all bought in to the same values priority? There are processes in the OR toolkit on analyzing values so that you can get different people's trade-offs and get a group of key decision makers to agree on the trade-offs. And sometimes just looking at those processes, if you are the key decision maker and you don't have a whole load of stakeholders, you yourself have to make those trade-offs, and it can be quite interesting to look at that structured process and make yourself go through it, because it's never easy when your values conflict. And there are other methods as well which are available. So that's all I'm going to say. Well, I might say a little bit more about values later on, but I'm going to just mention uncertainty about related decisions. And again, the obvious thing is to ask people. the decision has to be made, and the easiest way to do it, if possible, is to assess the two decisions in the same room. So, you know, it's the obvious thing is to put people together in the same room, to look at the options for making joint decisions. And it might be that the people in the same room are not authorized to make the joint decision, and you have to escalate. And it might be that the timing is such of the decisions that you can't make the decisions at the same time. You have to move on with one without knowing what the decision is on the other. Or it might be that the people who are in control of the decision elsewhere are not playing ball, or they're not part of your organization, in which case you would be using something like what-if modeling. And I'll be talking more about what-if modeling later on. So various options, and again, there are more different ways of approaching related decisions. This is one, and it's really, really not recommended, though you can, I may be the only person, but I'm sure I'm not, who's been in a room where people have said, well, we can't decide on this until we know what's happening with that. And you say, well, if we wait till we know what's happening with that, it'll be too late to do this. But people say, oh, just wait, let's see. It's not advisable. I'm going to say a little bit more about uncertainty about the world, in case you weren't horrified enough about the level of uncertainty that we're all facing. There is a way of looking at uncertainty called VUCA. Well, I call it VUCA. And I've got on the left, I'm showing a screenshot from an article about this and about how OR helps under such circumstances, which is in our free quarterly, no, I've forgotten how frequent, our free magazine, which talks about different case studies of OR and practicalities of OR. And I'm sure somebody can put the link in the chat. But just to say that I'm using uncertainty in a very loose sense. So uncertainty because of volatility, things keep changing. So from one day to the next, they're not predictable just because they change so rapidly. Uncertainty just because there is a range of possible outcomes for everything that you do. If you're looking into the future, and that's the kind of technical uncertainty that people talk about. Complexity, where things are interconnected. A change in one may cause changes in others that you wouldn't have thought about. It's not immediately visible because the situation is so interconnected, or there's so much that you haven't been able to pick up. And ambiguity, where there are you just don't know what's going on, and there are things that you don't know about what's going on. So you can think about all these different uncertainties, and I will allow you to ponder on those, but I'm going to move on to talk about the sorts of uncertainties about the world in future that we're addressing. Again, I've already had some examples. Here are some of the others, and you can see that I've ranked them from the actually really quite short-term, technical, not too big a range probably of options, uncertain questions, through to some really big questions about the massive potential changes. And we'll be looking at ways of tackling down this range. But I'm not going to actually refer specifically to this range. I'm going to talk about some of the ways that OR has about looking at uncertainty about the world. So these are different ways of handling uncertainty. I hope I may be the only person, but I'm probably not, who's been in that situation, or with people in that situation, with people in that situation. And certainly, I'm sure we've all been in that situation. And that heading is written as the alternative or, but it could have been written OR, because the OR person, especially if they're a consultant who doesn't actually own that problem, and they're simply advising you on that problem, and therefore isn't the one lying awake at night. The two possibilities that are open to you are to reduce uncertainty, so increase your knowledge about the different issues that are open, or strengthen your plans so that you can deal with uncertainty. So if we're looking at reducing uncertainty, you can do this through research, collect hard data, and we've had previous sessions in this have talked about how you can use your data, the data that you've already got, but of course you can go out and collect more data, or you can change your data collection systems. And of course, the more data you have, the more you understand about the world that you're working in. Analytics, actually looking at that data, doing things with it, looking at how much it spreads, how the different data points are connected with other data points and so on. And then using it, if the future is like the past, then you can use that to forecast. Of course, if the future is not like the past, those are where we get the biggest uncertainties and anxieties. When I talk about strengthening understanding to get better plans, this is the area that I'm going to spend more time on, because I think the previous slide, the reducing uncertainty, is better understood, and it's something that is people are more aware of. This is what you want to do. I think this is where we are getting into strengthening understanding, is about where you know that you do this. If you're the decision maker, you're trying to do this all the time. And this is where OR may or may not be able to help you. So spending more time exploring possible futures and possible options. Think system. So think, and I know this is a big thing in amongst a lot of charity think tanks, and generally in the charity world, charity funders as well at the moment, is systemic thinking and understanding the whole of the area that you're working in and have to plan across. Bring in as many voices as you can. Obviously, the user voice is one thing that we're always looking to: the volunteer voice, the staff voice, the stakeholder voice, the the funder voice, and so on. And then when you're building plans, is recognizing the variable future in there, and contingency planning where there are really big uncertainties that may go one way, may go another way, then contingency planning is particularly useful and important. And there's a concept, robustness, I think, is a generally understood concept, but there's a technical OR approach to robustness, which is actually saying, as you take your decisions or move your strategy forward, do it in steps where you can, where each of the steps, as far as possible, keeps as many of your options open as possible. And the aim is that you don't throw the die. You don't cut the die is not cast when you take your first step. Your first step may rule out some possible futures, but it rules out as few possible futures, possible outcomes as you as possible. And then what I'm going to be talking about more now, and for most of the rest of the session, is exploring possible futures and possible options, and just talking about some of the ways that OR can help with this. And when I say OR, this is how OR people will be thinking, but it's also how a lot of managers will be thinking. So it's not something that's in a separate box labeled OR. It's just that as an OR person, we were putting the emphasis on this, and also maybe bringing some techniques which are more familiar to us than to others. And the first has already been mentioned right at the start in Jane's introduction, is modelling and what-if analysis. And I'm sure that many of you here are actually familiar with modelling and what-if analysis, but I haven't done the questioning and the polling to check who. So I'm going to go through this anyway in a bit of detail, as if you weren't familiar. So forgive me if you are. So a model starts with how we think things work, and in particular for the sorts of things that we're looking at in planning, what factors will influence the outcomes, and converting that to mathematical formulae. Now, you can convert this to to diagrams which help people understand better what's going on. But the only way you can do what if analysis properly is if you convert to mathematical formula. And here's an example, this is a really simple example, but we know that the surplus on your program, if we're thinking about not the whole organization surplus, but on a particular program, then it'll be the total income from grants minus the fixed costs of the program and its overheads, its contribution to charity overheads, minus the cost per user times number of users. And I've assumed that a very simple approach to what a cost might look like. And then that would convert fairly simply to a mathematical formula where you're adding up, I'm assuming you've got actually 4 subsets for the program, each of which has got a specific grant bit going to it. So 4 bits of grant, 4 lots of fixed costs, 4 lots of contributions to overheads, and 4 marginal costs, the costs of each user. Very simple program. Now you may have to, depending on how you've got your screen set up, you may have to move your little pictures of everybody else in the room to see what this right-hand side. But then what we do very simply is we put in the numbers to work out the answer, and then move on to the what if. So what if the 4 grants come from different people and you don't win grant 1? What if actually there are 20% more users for project 3? Oops, sorry. 20% more users for project 3. What if overheads go up because actually the whole charity is running fewer projects and therefore is demanding greater overheads from the ones that it's greater overhead contribution from the ones that it's running. So you can see it's very simple. Obviously the what ifs will depend on the world that you're in. But then you've got your mathematical formula. It's very simple to put in the different numbers and say, well, what's the outcome? What's our program surplus if these different things happen? And that will give you a range of results. And you can use that results in a couple of different ways. So you can certainly use it for contingency planning. So, how are we going to deal with these circumstances? These are realistic circumstances which could happen, which could make things go wrong. We are not going to just lie in bed worrying about them overnight. We are going to have a contingency plan that says, if that happens, this is what I'll do. And that is a pretty good way of getting a better night's sleep if you can get everybody signed on to it. And I've also put expectation management in there. All of these, if you're working to a grant or a contract, you may well have targets, and the targets may well be built on the central case. But the central case may not give you what actually happens through no fault of your own, through no genuine failure, but possibly also through things that the grant maker can recognize. That they say, yeah, I understand that if such and such happens, you won't be able to make it. Yeah, I've got that covered. Or if they're not willing to reduce their expectations, or you don't have that sort of relationship with them, that's when you're into the contingency planning again. So I think that's all I want to say about what if analysis. I'm just going to say something here about decision analysis. Decision analysis is a whole structured approach to any sort of major decision, which puts the decision into the context, framing the decision, it puts it into the context of the world that you're operating in, looks at the different possible, the impacts across all of the different possible outcome channels that any particular activity might have, looks at the value trade-offs explicitly, models the uncertainties explicitly, looks at the robustness of the plan, and looks at what learning you can get from it. So I think that's all I'm going to say about decision analysis. But one of the ways that in decision analysis you would tend to look at uncertainties is using a decision tree. So it's another way of looking at what might happen, different format. So if you offer a service, a user comes or the user doesn't come with different probabilities. And you can guess those probabilities at the start, maybe built on your data collection, your reduction of uncertainty, or you can just put a finger in the air and you know how robust your assumptions are and how much therefore you need to worry about whether they're right or not. If the user does come, they may engage with the service, they may just come in and go out again because they don't like it. And again, you can assign probabilities to those. And for different users who do engage, they may get different levels of benefit. And again, you can assign probabilities to those. So you can look at this and work out as you go through what are the different possible outcomes. And there will be you can make this tree far more complicated with far more steps, because you might also have that the user doesn't come but gets some benefit simply from having seen the offer, and that may also be true from the user who sees the offer and doesn't come at all, or the user comes and doesn't engage. Maybe they will come back later. So you can pick up all sorts of things. Sorry, I add those. You assign the probabilities and values for each outcome. What might happen? What are the chances? And what's it worth to you? And that gives you a structure for looking at the different levels of uncertainty, which may help in getting together, especially if there's several of you involved in the decision making, may help in bringing that all together. The other main area I'm going to look at is scenario planning, and you may well have come across this, because again, it's in the pandemic, it's been quite a big discussion. And the aim of scenario planning is when there are huge changes afoot. So the COVID pandemic has been one area for scenario planning. The climate change questions are others. But general social change, general cultural change are also things on which people have built scenarios. And the idea of scenario planning is that you imagine different possible futures. I've got an example here from the pandemic, which actually comes from Deloitte and was designed for the commercial sector. So apologies if you see some of the scenarios that are designed are not appropriate. But the Deloitte have suggested that you might want to look at 4 different possible future worlds following the scenario. One is that it is a passing storm. Maybe we will build back better, but we no longer have to worry in detail about COVID itself. Having described that, just given it a title, you would then, in the scenario world, you would think much more about, well, supposing it is a passing storm, what does this mean? What does it mean for our users? What does it mean for our funders? What does it mean for our one shouldn't say competitors in the charity world, but for other people who are giving the same sort of service? What might the world look like for them? What are the different actions we would have to take to still be relevant, to still be sustainable, to still be delivering our mission? The second one, the second scenario that Deloitte had was good company, which is where states are so damaged by the consequences of the pandemic that the corporate world steps in and does what's necessary, becomes much more socially aware. I think if we're in the charity world, this would be where you're looking at the state fails even more than it has done, and the demand on charities is even more than it has been. The Sunrise in the East is less relevant, I think, to most charities, which is basically the China becoming the dominant power, and Lone Wolves is if we turn to the every person for themselves disaster scenario following COVID. But I hope from that you can imagine, you can say, the idea is to set possible future worlds that, to decide what are the big pictures that are important to you. is the big picture COVID and its consequences? Is the big picture the whole social changes that have been obvious over the last few years with, for example, the combination of the refugee crisis, the rise of xenophobia, the reductions in the welfare state, whatever? What are the big pictures that are important to you? And for each of the big pictures, what might you expect for the parts of the environment that are important to you? So, so taking those kind of future areas, and then looking at 3 or 4 different possible sets of world that we might have in the future that you can't influence, but that might happen because of the way things are going, the total unknownness about what might be happening. And then within those big pictures, telling that story about what the world might be, contingency planning and robustness again. What would you do if that happened? The classic scenario planning first came to prominence, I've forgotten how many decades ago, because Shell was using it, the oil company Shell was using it to look at possible scenarios for oil demand. And when the oil price, I think it's the oil price collapsed. It's either the oil price, I think it was the oil price collapse because of decisions made in the Middle East. Shell had a whole set of contingency plans ready to deal with that scenario, so they were one step ahead, and that was the selling point. Might not be a selling point for scenario planning for charities, but it does show that it's a way that can be very powerful if you feel paralyzed by uncertainty about what the world's going to be looking like. I'm just going to mention strategic choice analysis, which is a kind of a wraparound process for strategic decision making. So not so much necessarily for the whole plan, but for particular decision areas, which is about looking at these areas of uncertainty in groups of people who own the different activities that are involved, exposing what are the aims, what are we trying to achieve, what are the issues that are preventing us achieving it, what are the uncertainties around that, and thinking about what the options are for action under those circumstances, and generate, as far as we know, as far as you can tell, evaluating each of those options in terms of what the outcomes are that you really want. And usually such a process would result in exposing a lot of areas of uncertainty, which you can work on reducing using some of the approaches that I've mentioned here, so that you can come back with a reduced uncertainties and reevaluate and reconsider whether there are any other issues you need to continue to evaluate, and finally make a decision. So as you can see, there's a number of different ways that people have worked out approaches to reducing or handling uncertainty. So all I want to say in conclusion is it's really important to face up to uncertainty, not to ignore it. If you ignore it, you may be lucky, because the whole point of uncertainty, the whole point of, this might happen, is it might not. So you may be lucky. But I don't think many of us can be lucky throughout in the charity world. You can do more than you think. If you don't think you can do much about uncertainty, if you think that we cannot tell, you can probably do more than you think. Of course, if you think as much as I do, then you can't do more than you think. But there you go. OR can help reduce uncertainty and strengthen understanding of uncertainty, and it can help enable more resilient planning and more reliable target setting. So I think that is my final conclusion. So I think at this stage, I would like to invite you all to, I'm going to stop sharing the screen so that we can all see each other properly, if that's okay. I invite you all to turn on your cameras if you're not doing anything embarrassing, or if you've got enough bandwidth, and invite questions. So here we are. So
Ruth, there is one question that came in at the beginning from Sylvia in the chat, and it just says, what is the area of OR called which deals with uncertainty around values? interested in reading up more about this?
That's a very good question. I would, if you look at, try looking at decision conferencing and multi-criteria analysis. I don't know if any of the other OR people on the call would point you towards other particular areas that that you would look at. But the other big, there's a book called Rational Analysis for a something world, and it's not a crazy world. It might be for an uncertain world. I don't know if anybody can remember that, but it's edited by Jonathan Rosenhead, and it's a classic showing different ways of approaching, of structuring your problem, in which uncertainty is one of the givens. So it just assumes that you're going to be dealing with uncertainty, and it's problematic. That's it. Rational analysis for a problematic world, I think. Anybody else? I can see there's a couple of OR people on the call. Anybody want to suggest any other things for Sylvia?
We've had some suggestions from Louisa's sent a link to Impact magazine, and Graham sent everything as well. We've had a nice comment from Susan. Susanna, would you like to say a bit more about it to everybody? Unmute yourself. Say what you actually do.
Oh, myself. Well, I work in a community centre in Sheffield, and the uncertainty is part of everyday life. I guess that's true. I mean, I think, Ruth, what you were saying, factoring it in as a permanent state of affairs, I mean, that's kind of life in a way, isn't it? But the voluntary sector is particularly prone to uncertainty, and I just really valued the underlying theme of your discussion, which was to look it in the eye and not avoid it, and take it into account in a fully rational way. And that was very helpful. I'll admit to being a little befuddled sometimes by some of the jargon. I'm slightly jargon phobic, but you were very clear, and I found that very helpful. I've taken some pics of some of those diagrams, so thank you very much. And it's certainly, yeah, the rationality of how you handled uncertainty was very helpful.
Well, if it's of interest, I can always share the slides as a PDF. If Ruth, if you're happy for me to do that. Yeah,
that's fine. That's fine.
I'll make a PDF and I'll share them with the recording and a copy of the Impact article that you referred to as well.
Thank you. And Susanna, you really bring me back to reality, because I thought I'd cleared out the jargon. So I think it might be helpful if you put some of the jargon in the chat, and I will either at the end of this, or as a reminder to self, is note what I'm saying, which is jargon, because we all do this, don't we? You become a specialized area and forget.
I don't mean it to be a really sort of harsh criticism, because you were very clear, and it's OR, this is the headline for this webinar, so I appreciate, you need to use some technical terms sometimes. I suppose perhaps it maybe not so much jargon as theory. Maybe some examples might have been might have maybe brought out a little bit of the theory.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts or questions?
Yeah, Ruth, going back to the jargon again, of course. I wondered, with the scenario planning and the strategic choice, given Susanna's comment, whether you could actually recommend any case studies that use scenario planning and strategic choice that we could actually share with people.
Not off the top of my head.
No.
There's certainly a classic strategic choice case study, which probably goes into rather more detail than you might want in the book that I mentioned to Sylvia, but it's about 40 pages long. I don't think you want that sort of case study. So I'll see what I can find. but I have to warn you that I won't be able to look at this for the next few days. So I will have a look, and we'll add it to the list of resources.
We keep our case studies from Pro Bono OR on the OR Society website. I'll have a look through them over the next couple of days, and if I find any on any of these techniques, I'll give Louise the list that she can circulate the links together with everything else she's circulating, because I'm pretty sure that some of our volunteers will have used some of these techniques with clients in the third sector.
I think they may have used them in a much compressed format rather than going through kind of the whole process. Oh, yeah. So I quite often, so we talk about strategic choice. I just think about those different sorts of uncertainties because I find it very helpful, and then just talk through. I don't go through the whole process. I just sort of work through to get to what you might need in the end. I can see Daniel's waving his hand, and I'm not sure if Dominic was as well, but Daniel. I
just wanted to pick up on a point you just made about using things in their compressed form, because one of the challenges I've got is the amount of time I can get off people to actually engage in any of these processes. So there's this whole, the art of modelling. It's actually picking out the bits that matter quickly, that's useful, because there's just such a limit on people's bandwidth these days. We're on meetings all over the place and what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be realistic. If somebody's only got an hour to spend with you, then that you work out what you can do within the hour. If somebody's only got 20 minutes to spend with you, you can't do anything useful in 20 minutes. And they obviously don't attribute much importance to it. So, you know, it's not worth banging your head against the brick wall. So you know, you have to work within people's constraints to a certain point, and then beyond that point, you know, just say, not much value I can add. Just go with whatever it is you wanted to do.
I like your cutoff that any less than an hour, you just don't bother talking to them. I must remember that one.
Well, I mean, it depends what they want to do in that time. If you want to kind of sort out my problem in 20 minutes, then. but I mean, I exaggerate. I have had phone calls where, yes, there is something that you can do in 20 minutes, but you can't solve the problem. You can start opening up to what's the biggest thing that they might need to think about in their off moments when they're, you know, in the shower or wherever, which is where a lot of the strategic thinking does take place.
Yeah, but hopefully few Zoom calls.
Any other comments? Anything else anybody would like to flag up, or?
That's your final chance.
No, I found it useful. I've taken a lot of notes. I've got the articles and links and things like that to study offline.
Yeah, it was really useful. Thank you.
Good. I'm very glad about that. Okay, so if you'd like to share, put up the slides again, we'll just finish off.
Let me just. Sorry, oh, we've gone right back to the beginning.
Oh, yes. Do you want to see them all again? It'd be good at it by that. Yes. Okay. Right.
Yeah, just
yeah. So this is the last webinar in this series. Congratulations to any of you who sat through all 5 of them. Well done. In case any of you are haven't seen them all and are interested in some of the others that we have done, then you can get them all available from the same page as the bookings on the OR Society website. Next one, please, Ruth. So if you've got any problem, we've gone to Ruth.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, all right. if you've got any problem, if you've got some data, that's nice. If you haven't got any data, we can still cope with it. Then what we can provide you is, for a start, 5 days of volunteer time. Volunteers might be able to manage more, but we can generally offer 5 days, any time of the year, lasting over any amount of months, and we'll deliver to you whatever you've agreed. You might want a report, you might want a workshop, you might want an IT tool, whatever. And we generally have general analysts, but they're experienced consultants. They've been working in OR analysis for some years, and they know what they're doing. Next one, please, Ruth. So if you've got any big decisions you've got to make, any processes that you're worried about, any issues about information or data, and the one that I always like, what's keeping you awake at night? So if there's anything that's keeping you awake at night, we can possibly help. Next one, please, Ruth. So final links. If you want to find out any more about Pro Bono OR, then there's the website. And if you want to email, Louise is our Pro Bono manager, and you can get her on Pro Bono OR at the OR Society, and we'll be very happy to help. Thank you very much for coming. Any comments from anybody else?
I've put a few links in the chat for people if they want to link directly to the recordings or just the Pro Bono web pages.
You're a fantastic Pro Bono OR manager. Thank you, Louise.
I'm good at copying and pasting.
And thank you to everybody who's come along. It's great to see you all.
Thanks a lot. Lovely to see you. Very nice of you to contribute. All the best for the future. Bye-bye then.
Bye.
Bye.